Today I have over 15 fall decor DIYs for you, so get ready to do a little binging with all these amazing DIYs. I used these 3 plywood rectangles. I think I got them in a packet from Walmart for this project. I added some apple barrel burnt umber paint to a small amount of water and mixed it well to create a stain. I painted the stain mixture onto the wood and dried it with my heat gun. The stain was a little lighter than I wanted, so I added a small amount of Dollar Tree black acrylic paint and stirred it into the stain mixture. I applied the darker mixture to the boards, dried it with my heat gun, and then added another layer. The third coat gave me the richness I was looking for. I created these cut files in Design Space and then cut them out using Oracle 813 stencil vinyl. After weeding the vinyl, I applied it to some duck shelf liner. I know that sounds crazy, but I'll tell you, this works great as transfer paper. I can reuse it over and over, and it's even great at picking up small print. I'll leave a link to the Amazon store I get mine from in case you want to give it a try. I applied the stencil to the stained wood, used my Mod Podge roller to make sure it was stuck good, and then removed the transfer paper. For the bonfire sign, I used Waverly Maze chalk paint, and the font I used was Abelia. I'm not sure how to say it, but here it is. And I think I got it from defont.com, but I'm not positive. I know it was a free font because I very rarely pay for fonts. Honestly, I can't remember ever paying for a font. I also used a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin as my stencil. Isn't that funny? As my stencil brush. I saw another crafter do this, and I'll tell you, it really works. In my opinion, I have been more successful with this than I do with actual stencil brushes. I pounced the paint onto the stencil. I did this because I wanted my lines to be as crisp as possible with as little bleed through as possible. I moved the bonfire sign out of the way and started working on the next sign. I used my Mod Podge roller again and thought I would give the Mod Podge squeegee a try to see if it would help the stencil stick better. For the apple cider sign, I used Waverly Moss chalk paint, and the font I used was Grillin'. I also decided to use a Dollar Tree paintbrush to apply the paint. And with that one painted, it's time for the third sign. After applying the vinyl, I used my finger to make sure the stencil was stuck. I used Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and the pouncing method with the Dollar Tree makeup sponge and clothespin. The font I used was Magazine. I'll try to find all of these fonts and leave links to them in the description. I wanted to try all 3 stencil methods to see which one gave me the sharpest lines. After the signs dried, I removed the vinyl to see how they turned out. The apple cider sign turned out perfect with no bleed through. The pumpkin sign has no bleed through, and using the pouncing method, it created a weathered look. Even the bonfire sign looked good, so I now know you need to use more than just a roller to attach the stencil. To make the stands for each of the signs, I used leftover pieces of paint sticks that I stained using the same mixture I used on the bonfire sign. I put hot glue on the side of the paint stick and attached it to the sign just a little bit above the bottom. You don't want to attach directly at the bottom or the sign won't stand up. I learned this earlier in my crafting adventures after making a sign and trying to figure out why it kept tipping over. And look at how cute these stenciled tiara tray signs turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think of these little tiara tray signs. What you're going to need is some type of fabric. I'm using an old shirt, a mop, and I just took this mop head off of a mop from Dollar Tree, ping pong ball from Dollar Tree, got a black sock, and I picked up some of these red kidney beans from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use this hazelnut Waverly chalk paint for the nose. So let's go ahead and paint the nose so it can be drying. And I'm going to set that to the side. Okay, the next thing we want to do is get our kidney beans, and we're going to put them in the sock, in this black sock. Now I'm going to make a hole here. I may have to actually cut off some of this sock, a little bit too long. And now I'm going to hot glue this with a hole in it because I want to be able to hot glue the mop head down into the sock like so. So I'm just going to fill this up with a lot of hot glue. Take my mop head and hold it down in there. Now I'm just going to take the hot glue gun. I'm just going to go around the edge because I really don't want the head to fall off. Okay, so hopefully that will hold it. And now what I'm going to do is just cut it down the middle. Maybe not. I may just do this. That should fit fine. So I'm just going to start down here and just cut up at an angle. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I am actually going to iron like this to give it a seam for me to put my hot glue in. Let me start here and iron this down. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So we'll start down here at the bottom of the little hat. Put some hot glue. And then we're just going to run the hot glue all the way up. Okay, and now we're just going to turn our little hat in right side out. Then we're going to take our little hat, put it down over our gnome. So we're going to just stick the head on there like this. And most people are hot gluing these down, but I don't want to because I may even use this as a Christmas decoration, and I want to be able to put on a different type of hat. So I'm just going to leave the hat sitting there. Then now it's time to glue on our nose, but we need a second layer of paint. So let me go ahead and do that. And I'm going to sit it back down in here and let it dry. Just took some of the paint off. Dab that. Give that just a minute to dry. What I'm thinking about doing is putting a little pom-pom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little pom-pom from Dollar Tree and I'm just going to hot glue it onto the little hat, the little gnome's hat. See, isn't that cute? It's a little bit different. And there is our little fall gnome with his cute little pom-pom on his hat. Alright, stick around to see the final product. I made a trip to Hobby Lobby a few days ago and found this adorable little wooden truck and was shocked to see that it was only $4.99. When I saw it, I thought of a truck filled with pumpkins. While I was at Hobby Lobby, I saw some adorable pre-made trucks and wanted mine to look similar. I used Waverly antiquing wax for the bed of the truck and the sides. I applied the antiquing wax with a paintbrush and let it sit before rubbing it off with a paper towel because I wanted it to be a dark brown color. For the truck body, I used Apple Barrel Harvest Orange acrylic paint. This color reminds me of fall and pumpkins. Let me know in the comments what color makes you think of fall. I used a small Dollar Tree paintbrush to paint the body of the truck. For the fenders over the wheels, I originally painted them a gray color with a small paintbrush. I painted the wheels with apple barrel black and tried my best not to get the black paint on the other colors. Y'all know I'm a messy painter and usually wind up with paint everywhere, including on me and my clothes. When I was finished, this is what the farm truck looked like. I just don't like the fenders, so I decided to do a faux metal look on them and to the center of the wheels. To achieve this, I used Folk Art Gunmetal Gray metallic paint and a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and dabbed it onto the fenders. I used a small detail brush to apply the paint around the edges of the fenders. Next, I added some Folk Art brushed silver and dabbed it on top of the gunmetal gray. I then added Folk Art pearl white metallic paint. At this point, I started mixing the colors until I was happy with the faux metal look and painted the hubcaps on the wheels. I then went in with a detail brush and touched up all of the places on the truck that I'd gotten paint onto. Now that the truck was painted, it's time to work on the decal. I wanted to create something similar to the decal on the Hobby Lobby truck. I went into Design Space, added a square, sized it to the size I wanted the decal to cover, which was 2 inches, and changed the color to orange. I added my text, Hello Fall, but I couldn't decide which font I wanted to use, so I went to wordmark.it. This is a free website you can use to view all the fonts on your system. I typed in my saying and hit the little arrow. I was able to see the phrase with all the fonts on my system and decided to use Abigail 2 as my font. I went back to Design Space, searched my fonts for the Abigail 2, and changed the font on both words and sized them to fit. I uploaded these leaves from a design bundles file I had on hand, removed what I didn't want, and placed the leaves around the words. To make it easier, I will leave a link in the description for the Design Space file I created for you. I cut the design out and applied it to the side of the farm truck. And excuse the noise in the background, but my grand dog is here again and she's playing with a toy sitting right beside me. Not exactly like the Hobby Lobby farm truck, but a close second. I added some little miniature pumpkins from my stash to the back of the farm truck, and it is perfect. Would you have done anything differently? Let me know in the comments. I found this frame in my stash and thought I would try using some Couture ink with it. I removed everything from the frame and then cleaned the glass with rubbing alcohol. I laid down a fuzzing cloth and placed the unused stencil on it and pulled it up. I did this 4 or 5 times. You need to do this with the stencils so they aren't so sticky when you apply them to your surface. If the stencil has been used, defuzzing it 2 or 3 times is enough. If it's new, it's recommended to defuzz it at least 4 to 5 times. I applied the stencil to the glass, rubbed it down with my hand, and used a squeegee to make sure all the air bubbles were removed and to make sure the stencil was stuck to the glass. I chose the colors I wanted to use. I will be using shimmer copper ink for the word fall and beautiful, and eucalyptus for the words in the center. Since I am working with glass, I am using Chalkology ink instead of paste. I used the eucalyptus ink first. I added some of the ink to a Chalk Couture squeegee and added a layer over the words in the middle. I scraped off the excess ink and placed it back in the jar. I didn't want the ink to dry and ruin my stencil, so I pulled it up to just below the last line of print and then laid it back down. By doing this, the ink will not dry on the stencil and cause problems. I once again used a squeegee to remove the air bubbles from around the word fall. I applied the shimmer copper to the words fall and beautiful using the same squeegee I had used before. I did clean the squeegee first. I used a thick coat to start with, and then removed the excess ink and put it back into the jar. And now for the reveal. I carefully pull the stencil up. It's recommended to pull in an upward motion and not at an angle like you do with vinyl. I set the ink using my heat gun. You can use a blow dryer if you don't have a heat gun, or you can just let it dry on its own. I found this fall scrapbook paper at Michael's and thought it would look great as the background. I laid the glass on top of the scrapbook paper, found what part of the paper I liked the most, and traced around the frame and cut it out. I placed the glass back into the frame, placed the scrapbook paper on top of it, and put the frame back together. This piece turned out so beautiful. The pictures don't give it justice. If you are interested in recreating this project for your home, I will leave a link to the Chalk Couture products you will need in the description. I think you will love it as much as I do. Let me know in the comments what you think. I used this Dollar Tree chalkboard stand to make an adorable tiare tray sign. I recently became a Chalk Couture designer. So I decided I would give this buffalo plaid stencil a try for the background. This is a super large stencil, so all I did was place my sign under a section of the stencil and tried to get it straight. I used my Mod Podge squeegee to make sure the stencil was stuck down by gently rubbing it across the stencil. I had already placed some chalk couture paste in a little tray. I used a mini squeegee, placed some of the paste on the squeegee, and applied it to the stencil. I gently lifted the stencil up before the paste dried. And I was pleasantly surprised. The buffalo plaid turned out amazing. I know I'll be using this stencil a lot more in the future. I set the paint by using my heat gun, but you can allow it to dry on its own. I purchased this adorable fall cut file from Design Bundles and used it on the front of the buffalo plaid. I used white vinyl so it would pop. It looks amazing. I decided to stain the wood and the back with Waverly Antiquing Wax, but it could be left with the natural wood color if that's what you like. I've put together a kit if you are interested in recreating this DIY. You'll find a link for the kit in the description below. Let me know what you think of this cute little tiara tray sign in the comments. I found this beautiful oval frame recently at a yard sale. It cost me $1. I really love the fact that the metal on top was already distressed and rusted. I used a small screwdriver and removed 2 of the 4 hooks on the back so I could take the frame apart. I cleaned the frame with Awesome Cleaner and a paper towel. I use this on everything I get from yard sales and Goodwill. And you would be surprised at all the dust, dirt, and just crud I get off of items with it. If you like farmhouse decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. I used my heat gun to dry the frame because I didn't want to wait for it to dry. I used this scrapbook paper I got from Hobby Lobby for the background. I used Mod Podge to attach it to the back of the frame. After the Mod Podge dried, I used a Dollar Tree nail file to remove the excess paper. In a downward motion, I rubbed the paper with the file. You can use sandpaper or sanding block to do this also. This gave me smooth lines around the outside of the paper. I did have a little bit of the sides that wasn't covered, but I wasn't worried about it because it would be covered by the frame itself. I went ahead and added a layer of Mod Podge to the top of the paper because I didn't want the paper to rip when I applied the vinyl. This is another file I got from Design Bundles. I sized it to fit inside the frame, cut it out, and applied transfer paper. I removed the vinyl from the backing and applied it to the sign. And look at how cute this sign is. I'm glad I didn't do anything with the real wood. I may go back and add some clear stain to protect it, but I just love the natural wood look. Let me know in the comments what you think of this adorable little fall sign. I got this cute little owl candle holder at Goodwill for $1.99. It was cute and everything, but a little dated to me. I used some Waverly mineral chalk paint and painted the entire owl, even the inside. But that didn't give me the look I was going for. So I added some Dollar Tree spackling and some of the mineral chalk paint in a bowl and mixed it up. I used a paintbrush and applied the mixture to the entire piece and dried it with my heat gun. I used a skewer to knock off some of the mixture around the eyes and in the holes of the owl so you could still tell what it was. And when I was finished, this is what it looked like. I wanted to bring out more of the details of the owl. In a small container, I mixed some Waverly antiquing wax and water together. I applied this lightly to the owl with a chip brush. And I just loved how the antiquing wax looked on the little owl. After the owl was dry, I placed some floral foam into the opening at the top of the owl. Since you could see the floral foam through the holes in the front of the owl, I used some reindeer moss and shoved it in to cover the floral foam. Next, I added various floral picks from Dollar Tree. And just look at how stinking cute the owl turned out. And it just looks amazing on my fall tier tray. Let me know in the comments what you think of this adorable little owl. I saw this adorable pumpkin on Pinterest and decided I would give it a try using some leftover pieces of paint sticks. I played around with the different size paint sticks until I liked the way the pumpkin looked. I used Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and painted all of the sticks. I dried the sticks with my heat gun and then used a finger sander to distress them. For the pumpkin stem, I used 2 pieces of an old shutter. You could use craft sticks or another paint stick for the stem also. I hot glued the 4 paint sticks onto the stem. I wanted the pumpkin to stand on its own, so I glued a Dollar Tree tumbling tower block to the back of the pumpkin. I used some raffia. I think I got this bundle at Hobby Lobby, but I'm not sure. Trimmed it to fit. and glued it to the bottom of the stem right above the pumpkin. I used another small piece of raffia to make a simple bow and glued it to the top of the other raffia. I created the saying and design space. I'll leave a link to it in the description for any Cricut users. I removed the sayings and applied them to each section of the pumpkin. I added some dimension to the pumpkin using a fan brush and Waverly Antiquing wax. I also used it on the back and sides of the pumpkin. And look at how stinking cute this pumpkin is. Let me know in the comments if you would have done anything different. I think it looks amazing. I found this little sunshine board in my stash and thought I would make a little sign for a fall tier tray. I painted the front and sides with Waverly ink chalk paint first and dried it with my heat gun. I then decided to go back over it with Waverly plaster chalk paint and dried it with my heat gun. And for some reason I can't find the clip of me repainting it. I created the cut file in Design Space, cut it out, weeded the vinyl, and applied the vinyl to transfer paper. I lined the vinyl on the sign and then used my Mod Podge squeegee to rub the vinyl on. The sign is adorable just like this, but I recently became a chalk couture designer, so I wanted to add some chalk couture to this sign. I have this fall stencil which I've been working with and decided to use the pumpkin in the corners of the sign. I placed the stencil on the sign and covered up the areas I didn't want chalk to get with some painter's tape. I used some chalk couture orange peel and a mini squeegee. I placed a small amount of the paste on the squeegee and rubbed it across the pumpkin part of the stencil. I rubbed the squeegee across the stencil to remove the excess chalk. I pulled the stencil up and placed it in the opposite corner and did the same thing again. I used some Apple Barrel King's Gold acrylic paint and painted the stem of the pumpkins. And just look at how stinking cute the sign turned out. I just wish I would have had matte orange vinyl instead of the gloss, but I used what I had on hand. Let me know what you think of this little sign. If you're interested in becoming a chalk couture designer, or if you just want to take a look at what chalk couture offers, you'll find a link in my description. Okay guys, I saw this on Instagram and had to have one for myself. Y'all are going to love it. I have several of these pieces of wood in my stash. They measure approximately 5 inches by 7 inches. The perfect size for a wood book stack. The first book I painted with Waverly pumpkin chalk paint. I painted another with Waverly plaster chalk paint. And the last one I used Waverly Antiquing wax. Using my Cricut, I printed out the words for the spine of the books. I have a link to the cut file for any Cricut users in the description. After cutting and weeding the vinyl, I used transfer tape to apply the vinyl to the spines of the books. I kept the books together so I was able to line up the words evenly on the spines. I applied a layer of Mod Podge to the spines of the books and to the top book to protect it. After the Mod Podge had dried completely, I used a piece of twine and wrapped it around the bottom of the book stack and tied a simple knot. I didn't glue the book stack together, so I can arrange it however I want, and I can also use the books individually. And just look at how stinking cute. This is the perfect addition for your fall decor, and it's so simple and easy to make. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I picked up several of these wooden houses at a flea market back in May. I've already used a few of them in other DIYs and thought I would use this one to create a fall tiara tray piece. I tried painting the house with Waverly pumpkin chalk paint, but it just wasn't covering all the colors. Even after 3 coats, I could still see parts of the original house. So I decided to use Waverly ink chalk paint as my base. I painted the entire house with the black paint and dried it with my heat gun. I then went back and painted the front of the house with 3 coats of Waverly pumpkin chalk paint. I left the roof, sides, and back black. And that actually worked. You couldn't see the house through the paint now. I created my cut file on Design Space, and you can find a link to it in the description. I cut it out, weeded it, and applied it to transfer paper. I placed the vinyl on the little house. And just look at how cute! I still wanted to add something. I used a piece of twine and wrapped it around the top of the house 2 times and tied a small bow. I used a lighter and burned off all the fuzzies from the twine. And now I have the perfect little house for my farmhouse tray. This little house is just so stinking cute. I am not kidding. Let me know what you think of this little house in the comments. This DIY is a twofer. 2 DIYs in 1. I used this Dollar Tree mug to make a pumpkin spice tiara tray mug. I cleaned the mug with rubbing alcohol and a paper towel to remove all the dust and oil from the mug. I created this cut file in Design Space, cut it, weeded it, and applied it to transfer paper. I laid the vinyl on the mug, and yes, some of it didn't lay right, but I worked around it. I decided I wanted to make a topper for the mug. I traced around the top of the mug onto a piece of cardboard. I then cut the cardboard just inside of the line. I did this because I didn't want the cardboard sticking out beyond the mug. I wanted it to sit on the rim of the mug. I used a Dollar Tree styrofoam ball and cut a quarter of it off with a knife. This gave me a flat bottom on the ball. Next, I placed hot glue on the cardboard circle and place the flat end of the styrofoam ball on top of it. I used some old Dollar Tree caulk to create the whipped cream for the topper. I would actually recommend using a new tube because the caulking will come out so much easier. I applied the caulking around the cardboard and covered the styrofoam ball. I have made toppers in the past using fresh caulking, and it was a simple process to get the ball covered, but this caulk was old and some of it was dried out, so it gave me quite a fit. I eventually got everything covered with caulk. And if you don't want your hands covered in caulk, be sure to use some gloves. And then I realized I had made a small mistake. Just remember, be sure to place some wax paper under the cardboard before you start adding the caulking. Anyway, I used a knife and not so gently lifted the topper off of the mat and placed it on some wax paper. I sprinkled some cinnamon on top and also placed some whole cloves around the topper. I added some tan Dollar Tree beads to the topper just to give it a little more dimension. I also used some of these mini pumpkins I have in my stash and stacked them on one side of the topper, and then sprinkled more cinnamon. I didn't have any cinnamon sticks, so I took one of these Dollar Tree plastic spoons that I think I got in the wedding section and cut off the spoon part. So all I was left with was the top part of the spoon. I stuck it into the caulk and part way through the styrofoam. Once the topper was dry, I brought it back in and placed it on top of the sweater weather mug. And just look at how adorable. Even though I used the old caulk, I still think it turned out pretty stinking cute. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is a simple, easy, and quick fall DIY I think you're going to really love. I used Dollar Tree balloons to create these adorable little pumpkins. The first thing you'll want to do is cut the neck off of the balloons. I put 2 fingers in the balloon and grabbed a handful of stuffing and began stuffing the balloon until I was happy with the size. You can make these pumpkins whatever size you want depending on how much stuffing you put in them. After the balloon was stuffed, I rolled it around in my hand to shape it up. I added twine to add the indentions into the pumpkin. I actually tied the twine each time it overlapped. This actually helped to keep the twine in place. I tried just crossing it over, and when I got ready to move the twine into place, it would always slip off. When I was finished, I tied a knot at the top of the balloon. I moved the twine around and arranged it so that the balloon looked like a pumpkin. If you like farmhouse decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. short twig as the pumpkin stem and hot glued it to the top. I was afraid the hot glue would melt the balloon, but it worked without any problems. I then glued Spanish moss to the top and shaped it up and trimmed it. And look at how adorable these 3 little pumpkins are. I'm going to get some other color balloons and make more of these for sure. I think they are so stinking cute, and they are so super easy to make. Let me know in the comments if you'll be adding these adorable pumpkins to your fall decor this season. This is a cute hanging basket I got at a yard sale a few weeks back. I thought it was cute and so farmhouse, and I knew I could figure out something to do with it. You can see here that I gave $3 for it. When I saw the basket and the price, I grabbed it up. You can't beat $3. I used Waverly plaster chalk paint and dry brushed the basket using a chip brush. I wanted the basket to be lighter, but I didn't want to cover up all of the natural color. I got this file in a fall bundle from Design Bundles. The files you get from Design Bundles come in all different formats. I used the PNG format, sized it to fit the Dollar Tree frame, and then printed it out on regular printer paper and cut it down to the size of the frame I was going to use. After taking the frame apart, I traced around the glass part and cut it out. I used my chip brush and plaster paint to distress the outside of the black frame. I placed my printout and the frame back together, but first removed the stand from the back of the frame, since I was going to be hanging it on the front of the basket. I didn't want to just glue the frame to the basket because I want to be able to change it out with the seasons. It took some trial and error to figure out how I wanted to do this, but I finally did figure it out. I used a picture wall hanger and a pair of pliers. I bent the hanger so it would slide behind the strips of the basket. This is what the hanger looked like when I finished bending it. I placed the hanger onto the basket and then glued a D-ring onto the back of the frame. And look at how stinking cute this hanging basket turned out. I did go back and dry brush the rope because I just didn't think it looked right with the dark brown rope. I can change out the florals in the basket and the picture in the frame for the different seasons and holidays. Let me know in the comments what you think about this adorable hanging basket. This was such a fun project with a big impact on my shelf. I used 6 Dollar Tree solid square blocks and painted them with my favorite paint, of course, Waverly plaster chalk paint. I lost the footage of me painting and drilling the holes in the middle of the blocks. It's just amazing how things disappear on my camera. Do you have a problem like this? Things just disappearing for no reason? My keys are another thing I can never find. But anyway, after prepping the blocks, I used Design Space to create the letters for these seasonal blocks. I have a link in the description if you want to try this DIY for yourself. After cutting and weeding the vinyl, it was time to start applying the vinyl to the blocks. I lined the blocks up so I could eyeball where the letters needed to go. If you don't have a cutting machine, you can use Dollar Tree stickers to get the same effect. I have seen some really pretty sticker letters recently at Dollar Tree. I did each of the letters for each of the seasons, one season at a time. Now that the blocks are ready, it's time to move on to the beads. I use 2 sizes for the garland. I get my beads from Amazon, and you'll find a link to the store I get them from in the description. I wound up using 20mm and 16mm beads. I thought I had some 18mm, but I guess I've ran out. I placed the 16mm beads on a skewer and painted them with Waverly ink chalk paint. I placed the skewer on a bowl for the beads to dry. I wasn't worried about getting a solid color because I wanted the beads to look rustic. Next, I placed the 20mm beads on another skewer and did the same thing with Waverly plaster chalk paint. Once the beads were dry, it was time to put the garland together. I started at the end of the season and worked my way to the beginning. I used twine as my garland string. I pushed the twine through the hole in the block. I then added a white bead, a black bead, and then another white bead. This will be the pattern between all of the blocks. I did put tape around the end of my twine to make it easier to thread through the blocks and beads. I tied a knot at one end of the garland to hold the beads and blocks on. On the other end, I wanted to make a long tassel. I used Dollar Tree lace ribbon, twine, and some buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby. I cut them to the desired length and then stacked them together, alternating between all the different ribbons. I placed the stack on top of more twine and tied a really tight knot. I tied it as tight as I could get it. You can also use hot glue to hold the tassel together. To attach the tassel, I used the long twine from the garland, wrapped it around the tassel a few times, and then tied another tight knot. And when I was finished, I have a perfect piece for my shelf that I can change out for any season. I went with the black and white color scheme because it is neutral and can be used for any season. And besides, that is my favorite color scheme. Let me know in the comments what colors you would have used. I saw these adorable palette pumpkins on Facebook and knew I wanted to make a few for myself. I painted 3 Dollar Tree palettes with orange acrylic paint that I got from Dollar Tree. The only paint I've used from Dollar Tree was the white, and I didn't like it, but I was very impressed with this orange. The color is bright and the coverage is amazing for $1 acrylic paint. I will definitely be using more of their colored paints in the future. I mixed the paint with water to create an orange stain. I wanted the wood grain to show. I painted the 2 smaller palettes with the stain. For the larger palette, I mixed in a small amount of apple barrel burnt umber, so the color would be a little darker than the 2 smaller palettes. And then I realized I really liked the darker color, So I went back and added it to the two smaller pallets. I had this ivy in my stash and thought the stem would be perfect for the pumpkin stems. After cutting the stem, I used a marker to make a little curl in the stem for the pumpkins, and then straightened the end so I could glue it to the back of the pallets. At first, I was going to use the ivy leaves, but then remembered I had some fall leaves and decided to use them. I hot glued everything onto the pallets. If you like farmhouse decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. I then made two simple bows using this Dollar Tree ribbon and hot glued them to the front of the two smaller pallet pumpkins. I decided to wrap some twine around the larger pumpkin. The two smaller pallet pumpkins will stand on their own, and I added two tumbling tower blocks to the back of the larger one to help it stand. I glued the blocks even with the bottom boards running across the back. And look at how stinking cute these little pallet pumpkins turned out. They are so farmhouse. I love them. Let me know in the comments what you think of these adorable little pumpkins. I used this little sign I got from Goodwill for 99 cents to create an adorable harvest tier tray sign. I sprayed the sign with awesome cleaner and used a paper towel to remove all the dust, dirt, and grime. For the frame, I used Americana antiquing wax. I painted it on with a paintbrush and then removed it with a paper towel. For the inside, I used apple barrel white acrylic paint and dried it with my heat gun. I used this plaid paper I got from Hobby Lobby and used Mod Podge and some new Mod Podge brushes to attach it to the center of the frame. You can find a link directly to Plaid where I get my Mod Podge and the accessories in the description, in case you're like me and you can't find it in stores near you. Oh, and I also got this Mod Podge squeegee, which works great on thicker paper to remove the bubbles. I then added another layer of Mod Podge to the top of the paper to protect it. I removed the metal from this piece with a Dollar Tree scraper. I wanted to add it to the frame I had just finished. I first tried to attach the harvest part to the frame with hot glue, and then had to use super glue because of the metal. Metal and hot glue just don't like each other. I found these little pumpkins in a bag in my stash and thought they would be so adorable attached to this little sign. I hot glued them in the corner. This little tier tray sign turned out cuter than I thought it would. And look at how stinking cute it is on this little tray. And it was so easy to put together. Let me know in the comments what you think of this little fall tiara tray sign. I just love it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Happy crafting!